Greetings and a warm welcome to all the participants and coding enthusiasts. We have joined here on our second insightful workshop designed to pave the way for the exciting coding event on the horizon, that is, MADHack 3.0. A journey fueled by the passion for coding, innovation, and mobile app development. As we gather here, we stand at the threshold of endless possibilities, ready to embark on a voyage of discovery and learning. Myself, Hashir Ahmed, a first-year undergraduate at University of Colombo School of Computing, and I'm thrilled to serve you as your moderator for this workshop. As we embark on this exciting journey, allow me to outline the key milestones and activities that will shape our experience in the coming weeks. So, on the 6th, we launched our MADHack 3.0 with the awareness session. On the 10th of January, we had our first workshop on the valuable insights of UI UX parts of mobile app designing. For those who missed those sessions, you may find the link for those sessions in our WhatsApp group. And on the 25th, we excitedly initiated the registration process by opening the designated link in our website. And today, we have joined here for our second workshop to explore the fascinating realms of Flutter. On the 7th, our first round of hackathon will be open. Following that, on the Saturday, on the 11th of Sunday, another workshop will be held. Probably that will also be an online workshop. After a week's time, we will be announcing our top 10 finalists who will be participating in the final hackathon on the 24th. On the following day, we will have our award ceremony. Stay on alert, stay updated, and prepare yourself. A lot of exciting events are coming up. So, that being said, before moving on to the main agenda, guys, a link for the Q&A has been shared in our WhatsApp group and will be shared in the chat box. So while the session is going on, if you guys get any questions, feel free to submit them. So coming on to the main event of the agenda, allow me to introduce Mr. Rangana Perera. He is an he's an associate technical lead at Ascentic Private Limited with over 5 years of experience in mobile application development, specializing in Flutter. Armed with a bachelor's in applied sciences from Wamba University of Sri Lanka, Mr. Rangana is a versatile professional who believes in continuous learning across various technologies while excelling in at least one. His proactive and innovative approach makes him a valuable asset in the dynamic field of technology. So he'll be talking deep about the Flutter. Mr. Rangana, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Ashir. So first off, I hope I can hear me.
Yes, sir. You're
I'm gonna share a link, small poll in a way, so that I can know the crowd a little better. Just have an idea of the Flutter skills of everyone who's participating here. And while that's happening, it seems I'm unable to share the screen. Ashir, I get a warning saying the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Is that something you can fix?
Give me a minute, I'll check. Can you check now, sir? Is it okay?
Yes. I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible, sir.
Right, so getting some interesting poll results. One who can do the session as well. That's really nice to hear. Yeah, so I'm gonna not introduce myself again since Harshal did a good job, better than me even. Let's have a look at what we're going to do in this workshop. This is my agenda for the day. We're going to do a small introduction to mobile app development and the Flutter basics and UI, some UI aspects of it, the common app architectures that we can use, and some packages, uh, and the bread and butter of any Flutter application, the state management side of it. These two, the last two will be like just for an information purpose. I don't know whether you will have this up to this extent on your hackathons, but testing and performance deploying is a really important step of Flutter applications if you are doing in an enterprise level application. So with that said, let's have an introduction to Flutter. And it seems most, at least 44% here have some knowledge of mobile development, and there are some first timers as well. So I'm gonna breeze a little bit quickly on the general aspect of mobile development. So in mobile development, we have these two keywords called native development and cross-platform, where the today's focus, Flutter, is a cross-platform language. And what basically is the difference of this native and cross-platform is the code base, because native applications, that is the iOS and Android side of it, they have individual code bases, Kotlin for Android and Swift UI for iOS. So this this indicates that we need to have two separate applications. If you're going to build an application that is going to be sent for the customer, the good part of Flutter and React Native, and these are some old old ones as well, Xamarin Forms and Cordova, also known as Ionic for some people. So all of them, they have this common code base, which you can port the code to respective platforms. So that is the basic idea of cross platforms. And when you're choosing uh, a development language, depending on the complex functionalities or your performance requirements, or maybe even security like encryption, if you have encrypted video sharing, or if you're very concerned about the app sizes, you're probably good to go with native development in that case, because Flutter inclusive, all cross-platform. They are a bridge between the native side, so you don't get 100% out of what you get on native. So if you want these sort of complex uh, functionalities and things like that, you need to go with native. But luckily, in most of the use cases, we find we don't have that, so we can go with any cross-platform platform we want. So in this case, Flutter. Flutter is a very up and coming. It's a really good platform to learn. Like I said, it's a same code base for multiple environments, and not just Android and iOS. You can even go for desktop, web, Linux, Mac OS, anything you want. So it's a really versatile language. And the next best part is it has a uh, okay. So
Guys, please.
yeah. Nice. So also it has a really comprehensive widget catalog. So the widget is the backbone of any Flutter applications. We'll go towards that during the session. And with these widgets, you have a seamless UI experience. That means where we can use the same widget, but it will handle itself differently. It will show in a different way based on the platform you're using. So in an iOS application or an Android application, you can see the difference of those specific widgets. And it has a really rapid development phase. You can quickly come up with an application rather than wasting time on useless boilerplate coding. And it has a really good developer experience. This is personally from my experience. So I will talk about that a little more later. But we have this thing called developer tools. I also have a screenshot somewhere in this slide. I'll show that later. But essentially, what it does is it has a really good impact of you can see the burn down charts, you can see the performance, how it behaves on each separate screens or even frames, and you can see how the memory is gonna is using on that specific operation, and there's a good community as well, and most of all, it's the best documentation that you can find, and it's really good for a newcomer. You can there's a lot of helper documentation within the flutter.dev website, so anyone can start up quite easily. And finally, the Dart language. So Dart language is the language that we're using for Flutter development, and it's a null safe, type safe, a double OP language. So if you have some sort of double OP experience, it will be quite easy for you to learn. And not just double OP, you can also use it for functional programming as well. They have helper packages if you are a functional programmer. So you have that option as well. And then let's talk a little bit on Flutter versus React Native. If you are a React Native developer, um, my personal experience, my the developer experience is what I usually see when you compare React Native and Flutter. So my biggest complaint is, or at least my biggest perk with using Flutter is you have the debugger inbuilt on any IDE you want, whether it's VS Code or Android Studio, whatever you want, it's there. You don't need to go deep into the JS code to find out where exactly is the breakpoint and things like that if you have a React Native background. And since there's a lot of inbuilt components, you don't need to depend too much on third-party libraries. And some basic requirements if you're a very newcomer, since I saw some of them in the poll. You can have any preferred IDE you want, whether it's an Android Studio or VS Code, depending on your performance of your laptop. Most people go for VS Code because it's very lightweight, and have a debuggable device. Uh, if you're using an Android device, that's the best, because you won't have any performance decrement since if you're using an emulator on your laptop. And if you have an intention to develop iOS or macOS apps, you need to have a MacBook, or you need to have access to a cloud VM where you can build the iOS aspect of it. So yeah, that's too bad for completely Apple developers. Right, let's go for some Flutter basics. The first thing that you need to understand is in Flutter, everything is a widget. So if you can see in this uh, on the first left side of it, the root widget that is usually called the material app or the Cupertino app in a Flutter application, and that's the controlling side of the application. And the tree is built on child level. So the first layer of the widget can be pages, and that each page can have another layer of widgets. Like so, in this the second example, you can see the UI of it, like a demo page. We have an app bar, some text on the middle of it, and then a floating action button at the bottom right. So the breakdown of the widget tree will be the scaffold as the second hierarchical widget, where the first one will be a material app or the Cupertino app in this case. So the scaffold will be one widget, and the scaffold will have three sub widgets again: app bars, center, and the floating action button. The center because two other messages, the two texts are one underneath the other, and that needs to be centered in the space that you have. So ideally you need to grasp, like you need to see the UI, and from your idea of your widgets and how widgets behave, you need to map the widget tree and decide, do I need to break this into some different files? Because of course you can just write it on a single file, but it's much more maintainable if you break down things into different files. So um, need to understand, okay, I'm going to break this center column text into one file, and the app bar on another file, and the fab on another file, and the scaffold on another file. So that's how the widget tree is situated. And the reason Flutter uses widget tree, I will get to that on state management. So just give yourself a heads up. So there's something like this on Flutter. And when it comes to a little bit of theming, we have two different theme options. Like I said, two different uh, preset theming options: Material UI and Cupertino, that is the human interface guidelines. And that's basically the iOS app look and feel and the Android look and feel. So in this screenshot that you can see, uh, there's a slider and a switch and a text field and a button. So uh, on Flutter code level, you will only see it's just a button. But uh, on the framework level itself, it will adapt itself into a button on iOS design level and a material design level. So there are widgets like that. So we call them as platform adaptive widgets. Things like switch, radio, checkboxes. There are a bunch of widgets that have that's been included within um, the Flutter framework itself, or you can just build your own. So it's just a matter of requirement. So in most cases, we usually go for a singular theme. We don't unless the client wants it. Uh, if the client really wants the look and feel of an iOS app and an Android app, then we have to balance between two design sections if for the widgets that don't have a platform adaptation. So in most of the cases, we use a singular design, mostly leaning towards material because that's the biggest percentage of design levels. And you can have more information about the platform adaptiveness in this link that I've shown. So it's not just widgets, it's also behaviors as well, like how the list scroll behaves, how the paddings of different touch areas, how it works, or the gestures, the animations, how pages are transitioned from an iOS page. If you open up a page, usually you see a swipe animation, left and right. In Android, you see it like from bottom to top, like a vertical animation. So it depends on the platform adaptiveness that is given from Flutter framework itself. And then since I mentioned about navigation, we have four most common navigation options in Flutter. That is the page, obviously. And we have pop-ups. So the second screenshot that you have, like the login one, that's like a pop-up where uh, some sections of the app is blocked, and you can see some sort of a pop, like a modal or a page, like a partial page in the middle of it. So usually this was the case very much back then, but now people are using the modal, that is the third one uh, on the bottom. So that's because with the you might have got this from your design workshop, but usually people use the thumb the most. So it's much more convenient to use the modal instead because the modal is situated right near your thumb. So it's much more UI effective. And then finally, you have the pop-up menus. This is uh, also, I think there is a material pop-up that I've showed, but some in some iOS pop-up, it will be a different design. And then we come to some networking aspects of it, how asynchronous operations work in Flutter. So you might have, if you have come from a web background, you might have heard of promises, or if you have a C background, you have heard about tasks. So these, the equivalent of Flutter is future, and that is basically calling that the function is going to be a long process. So we are not waiting on it. So in uh, the the example that I've shown, I have put a await command, so that will wait on it. But how Flutter will identify an asynchronous method is that if you mark it as future with an async, uh, it will it will not block the main thread, and that is maybe you will discuss this on advance the workshop, because asynchronous is the heart of Flutter. You need to not block the main thread and do manage your resources in a good way. So whenever you use an asynchronous operation and you want to show those information in GUI, Flutter has inbuilt two widgets, that is the future builder and the stream builder. The stream is a different asynchronous operation. So you're listening to a list of stream of data. So it's like a always connection that's waiting on an event. Usually you see this in a real-time device, something like the Firebase real-time database. So, uh, so for those sort of operations, you have two future builders and stream builders, and you can see that in those sort of the builders, you have always three major options. You have always a loading state, and you can have an error, or you can have the data. So in any Flutter application, you need to handle all three of those states. So this is the inbuilt way. I can show a state management specific widgets on the state management side of it. So next up on Flutter basics, animations. So this is one of the key like the one of the best parts of Flutter, in my opinion, because they have really good rendering libraries within Flutter. So they have a really nice look and feel with animations. So of course they have inbuilt animations like animated text boxes, animated sizes, styles, things like that. So you need to if your requirement is a small one like that, just animating a text, or uh, maybe even displaying an image that's moving between the transition. We call it the hero widget in this case. So there are inbuilt ones, or there are third-party packages. There are some cool loading indicators that you can just use. So all that animation is done within the third party. You don't need to reinvent the wheel in a sense. Or you can have Lottie or Rive. So the image that you see on the right, the GIF that you see, so that's from Rive, and that's basically a Flash kind of a animation studio, and that's separate from Flutter. So you need to work on that separately and just export it, and you can just easily use it on Flutter itself. And that's what I think a really good way of handling, like if you have a good team, someone who is very good at animations, they can just work on the on Lottie or Rive and just export it and just use it directly on Flutter without any issues. And like you see in this animation, Rive actually has uh, like actions or callbacks you can use on. So if you can see, like on the password, the bear hides his eyes. So that's you can have an action defined if I'm touching on this password. So the animation will behave accordingly. Yep. So maybe you can check on that on your own time. Uh, Finally, with all that said, I didn't explain too much about the widget catalog, like how many widgets are there, but just to say how we approach a wireframe, or in this case, the high fidelity design that we see on this page, the Figma design, how a person like me would approach these sort of problems. So on uh, so yeah, the bread and butter of Flutter widgets is the row and column. A row is a horizontal filling of elements, and the column is a vertical filling of elements. So in this case, the second UI, I would see as um, a row with two columns, with a column saying one text, second text, and at the end of the row, the face. So likewise, you need to once you see the design, the first step is breaking down the widget tree that I showed you earlier. And after that, once you break down the widget tree, you can see like which parts do I need to separate, because it has what you call as a state. And okay, that's not the next step, but probably somewhat after, I'll show you why we need to break things because of the state. So the next part is the app architecture. So there are some common architectural patterns you can use on Flutter. Most commonly MVC and MVVM. We see this on simple, very simple and small scale apps, because you have a very low learning curve on these two architectures, and it's quite easy to use as well. So you don't need to invest too much time, and you can do it quite fast. But in enterprise level applications, like we do on in most of the enterprise workplaces, we usually use clean architecture or the block patterns. Uh, Even more than block, we nowadays Flutter is moving more towards clean architecture, uh, where you are able to test the application more, because testing is a vital aspect of any application. So uh, we usually go towards clean architecture, or you can also go towards block. So all of these um, architectures, they depend on this concept called listenables, in a sense. So you listen to an application, so you listen to a state and do some changes on the UI, and from the UI you send some events or some sort of an action, and it trigger backs the state change. So that is the core concept of how it works. But how you arrange the file structure, the folder structures, is entirely dependent on you. So in my advice is, for any small scale or simple apps, go always towards MVC. That's probably the easiest. And some packages. So how packages work in Flutter. So there are developers who have this mindset: I'm going to build everything custom. I'm going to not depend on anything else. So that is uh, that is a, I guess it's a developer preference, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel, is what I say. You can always use third-party libraries, but you should always think about how the package is maintained. So the dart pub, the pub.dev, that is where you can. It's a website you can go and watch, and you can find packages, Flutter packages for your requirement, in a sense. And you should always, so first thing you should always do is you should always check whether the package is well maintained, and how easy is it to use. And you can go to the change log and see uh, what sort of breaking changes they are introducing and how often they do it. Because at the end of the day, if you are using this package in your own project, so you need to maintain your project as well. Uh, so it all depends on how much of an effort you will need to put to get this done. So at the start of it, if you just get all packages and just use it just like that, uh, you will have a really good first release. But after about 6 months, if you will get piled up maintenance, and once there's a couple of breaking changes, it's going to be hell on earth. So make sure you have a really good consideration before using anything on pub.dev. And finally, platform channels. So this is where the midpoint of what happens when you don't have a package for what you want, and that needs to be done on differently depending on the operation platform that you're going to use. So for an example, like if you have some sort of native level camera that you need to change, or maybe change the aperture or the flash intensity, there is no package like that on Flutter asset. You have the access to the camera, but you don't have intimate control of those uh, individual characteristics. So if you want to still use Flutter, you need to write your own way of doing things, and that is the platform channel. and you can invoke different methods on different platforms. And yes, finally, we get to state management. And like I said, this is the heart of any Flutter application. So let's dive into this. And this is where most people get confused with Flutter. So number one, what is state? So the state of an application is the current condition of anything. So for an example, like if you have used Flutter, if you have built Flutter, when you create it, the first example that you get is a count application. So in that counter, you have a value. The current value is 0, and when you add it, when you press plus plus plus, you get the value increases from 0 to whatever. So the value is the state in this case. And what you need to understand is Flutter is a declarative language at its heart. So if you're coming from a background with Android or like a native level background, uh, you might have noticed that there were on controller level, you have a way of getting the widget reference and just setting the text and changing it. So that is not an option on Flutter at all. The reason is the Flutter how the Flutter framework works is it is working as the widget tree, and the UI is always drawn with the current state. So if you have the state as 0, the UI will just take the state value as it is and just show it. You can't change the widget state from like widget.set text or something like that. You don't have that option. So what you have instead is you have the option to change the state instead. So you have the reference to the value. You just value +1 and rebuild the widget tree. And after when that rebuild happens, the UI takes the current state, now maybe 1 or 2, whatever, and shows that value. So that's how the Flutter widget tree works. You should always think about how state is gonna how 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 you're gonna manage your state. And the the next scary part comes with how like why so how the state changes is rebuilding the widget tree, and rebuilding is always an expensive process. So now we come to the next step of it on states. So that's is app state and the widget state. So app state is like some states that you need to persist within the application on your application timeline. So for an example, uh, whether you're a logged in user or not, because so that state needs to be there within all the screens. And maybe the language that you have selected, or maybe the theme, whether it's a light theme or a dark theme. So that might be like a app-wise state. Whereas the widget state will be like a very isolated state. So in this case, the count in the count example that I said, that was the value. That was the only state. That widget state was value. And some maybe even something like on the bottom navigation, like what tab was selected. So that might be a widget state. So to handle these sort of states, Flutter gives you two types of basic widgets. That is the stateless and the stateful widgets. So stateless, by its definition, the word itself, it doesn't have a state. It just uses what it is, and it just shows. You can't change the state dynamically. Uh, and the stateful widget is you have a reference to the state. I'll show this later on in an example. So in a stateful widget, since you have access to the state, you have these life cycle methods that you can use. And that is the init state, dispose, and the build. So the build state, it's common for stateless as well as stateful, but the init state and dispose are two key life cycle methods that you have access on stateful widgets. In a nutshell, init state just fires just when the first frame is drawn. Um, Dispose. It's You have a cleanup function in a sense. You have maybe listeners or controllers that you need to dispose of when you are moving away from the page, maybe. And the build is what you always rebuild on the widget tree. So these are three things that you need to have a good idea on um, when you're working with Flutter. And then finally, we come to the picker. So there are a lot of state management libraries available. So Flutter inbuilt has set state. That is the way that you can change your state and manage your state. That is the inbuilt Flutter way. But that gets very, very tough to do when your app is scaling. So they have introduced a lot of third-party libraries. I myself, I use Provider and Riverpod, even then Riverpod mostly. But there are so many options. If you have uh, like a web background, you would be much more comfortable with Redux probably, with Redux stores and reducers. Or if you're coming from a Java perspective with listeners and streams, you will have more easy time with RxDart. Or you can have, if you have a really good observable skills, you can go with MobX. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of options, and you can also go for GetX. That is, it's one of the controversial packages in Flutter. The pub.dat, it's one of the most liked and download, and one of the most talked upon as well. Like there's so many controversies, but I've used it myself, so it's quite easy. Uh, yeah, you can try again, figure it out on your own. So yeah, so these are some you can try out. And one of the reasons that I love using Riverpod is they have this generator method where you have this data error loading states that I mentioned earlier. It becomes inbuilt in a sense. So it's pretty much very easy to use, and you always know that you need to have something on all three of this. So it makes error handling also very centralized as well. And I guess some people are like this right now. Like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, let's actually show some things. Let's see. Mm, I hope you can see. So I have small, a really, really small movie app where it's an open API. And I'm going to just run on all four platforms just for the fun of it. So in any Flutter application, if you have turned turned it on, you will see that, how do I hide this? Yeah, you will see the Android folders, the iOS, the Linux, and the Mac OS. So since I'm using a Mac, I can only run Mac OS, iOS, and Android. If you're on a Windows, you will have Windows and no Mac OS and iOS. So likewise, depending on the OS that you're running on, you will have access to it or not. And so like I hope you can see the screens. So this is my Mac application. This is my web application. This is my iOS application. This is my Android application. So uh, I can have the same UI on uh, all four screens. And if you can see that on the Mac and web as well, you have this hovering uh, aspect of it, and that is inbuilt with Flutter. You don't need to worry about anything. Like you don't see it on phones because there's no way to hover on a phone. But you have the icon is changed to a hand, and you can use the scrolling of your touchpad or the mouse, whatever, and this will work as a touchpad. So uh, if you can see like how the animations are working, like so on iOS it's like a side by side, whereas Android is like popping up or coming from bottom to top. So that is all Flutter handling. And I can show you like what one of the uh, really cool things with Flutter, that is you can change things on the go. And so I'm gonna change this menu icon, which is not doing anything at the moment. I'm gonna just have an icon button instead, and my button is gonna be refreshing things instead. So in my case, I've used the set state. This is the Flutter version of it, of state management. So what it does is it has a list of movies. This is your stateful widget. And on the init state, I've called this method to get load data, and it's called only once. And that's how you want it to be. If you call this get data on the build method, it's going to keep on running and it's going to keep on fetching your data. So you always want to have one-time executions in your init state. And then once you get these data, you're going to set this state. So uh, by setting this state on my UI, I check whether the movies is null. So if it's not null, I'm going to show the uh, list view with a refresh uh, there as well. Uh, or I'm going to just show a loading progress indicator. So it's very declarative. It's just checking, do you have elements, or is this variable, does it even have a value? Yes. Okay, show this. If you don't, show the other one. So that's how Flutter behaves. It's very declarative. And my yeah, let's go back to the refresh button. So what I'm gonna do is over here, movies, I'm gonna say you're gonna get null again. So otherwise I won't uh, okay, let's actually not do this. So by calling this method get data, I'm getting these values from the endpoint and setting the state, right? So this is the cool function of it, like hot refresh. So once I refresh, I think I was on web, yes. So if I'm on web, like my refresh button, it will change automatically. So I think this is, since I have 4, it's quite hard to figure out what. I think this is iPhone. So yeah. So it's quite instantaneous. You don't need to rerun the application again. It's done on the fly. And if you can see, like it's fetching the data. We can have a breakpoint here. So it's fetching the data. So all that change has gone, but you don't see any nothing is shown on the UI. That's because the state hasn't changed, because uh, on loading on this pressing of reload, you're not doing anything here. So let's say movie is null and see what happens. it is hitting the get data, but still it doesn't do anything. That's because we are still haven't refreshed rebuilt the tree. So if you want to rebuild the tree, uh, we're gonna say set state. So now you can see that there's a UI change because we made this set state, that is changing the state declaratively, and that will affect the UI. So now my point of why we go for a third party library is because this gets really polluted when you have a lot of things. So in this case, it was just a movie list. But imagine like you have some actions on this list item, which is on another file itself, and you're going to do something here, and that is going to affect this one. So there's a lot of back and forth going on, how to change the state from a file level object. And also we need to think about how the rebuild is going to work, because by setting this state, I'm rebuilding this entire widget. So from build, so that's where the rebuild happens. So from this entire widget, I'm going to rebuild, and that's expensive because it fetches all these items again and again. But maybe I just only wanted this one to change. So uh, it gets very complicated with state management. Uh, so that's why you go for a third-party solution where you can cater. Maybe let's say this, you need to say top rated, and on change you need to say best sellers or something like that. And you don't want to change this, just this text maybe. And uh, so you have a isolated state changer from the third-party library, because that's not something you can do from the Flutter. I mean, you can, but it's complicated. So you go for the easy way, and that's using state management libraries. So we'll probably talk a lot more on state management on the advanced workshop, because there's endless amounts of things to do on state management. And yeah, I'm gonna go back to uh, the presentation. I hope presentation is visible.
Yes, 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 good. So,
Okay. So finally, let's talk a little about testing and performance. So this is two key concepts when it comes to a Flutter application. We need to test what we write, and Flutter gives unit testing, widget testing, and integration testing options. So what usually happens on unit test is, so I have this screenshot here. This is a unit test that I did for passing uh, a duration string that is coming from the API, and pass it to the Flutter version of duration, which is different, as you can see. So this is testing whether the method that I wrote for uh, trying to pass it, whether it works for all different combinations of duration strings in a sense. And widget testing is the same thing, but on a widget level, where you can have like the widget loading error and data maybe, and see whether the widget changes on the different state that you expose. And the integration testing is the best way of testing in a sense, because that usually works with how the client will approach a problem. They will want to test whether uh, when you log in, do you go to the login completed screen, or maybe the onboard screen should only be shown once, whether it's happening like that, or like whether you're fetching the correct data. So you can test a flow of uh, what's going on in your application with testing on integrations. So finally, you have the Dart Dev Tools. So this is a tooling. It's quite a big window. Uh, on There are seven main compartments of it. Like you can see how the widget tree is on Flutter level, whether like how you have developed your widget tree, and on rebuilds you can see which widgets are rebuilding. And like I said, performance, you can see how your RAM is using on some of the functions. Is it going over? Is it going out of memory? And on which method is it going on out of memory, like that. Likewise in CPU. Um, and also like how much frames are being rebuilt, because at the end of the day, frames is uh, you always want to have low number of rebuilds while you're doing something. You need to achieve something without the least amounts of rebuilds, and that's something you can check out with that dev tools. And also you can have network and logging, like the print statements, and how your network requests are going from your application, and also see what factors are affecting your app sizes, like how uh, what sort of activities you can do to reduce your app size, like changing your assets, or whether there's any code that is code files that are too big where you can improve on. So things like that, it's quite accessible on Dart DevTools. And finally, deployment. How you're going to deploy. Uh, Usually, you always use some sort of a version controlling with Git. And next up, we get some sort of build artifact with Flutter. There's a command flutter build with whatever platform you want, and you get some sort of a build artifact. So in Android, it will be like an APK or an app bundle. On web, you have a list of files like the HTML, the manifest. You can just copy that into a static hosting and just use the Flutter web application. So uh, that is like if you want to do it on your own. But we usually combine this with a CI/CD pipeline. Uh, Code Magic is something you can try out for free even. I think you have about 500 minutes for a user for a month, and you can try it out. You can integrate your uh, application. It's not just Flutter. I think there's a bunch of other languages that it supports. And of course, Azure pipelines, Bitrise, there are that's like common CI/CD options that you can work on. And finally, when it comes to uh, deploying to the client, we go through the app stores, the Play stores, and if you're having a desktop app, Microsoft stores. So that's maybe some additional information to your workshop. Yeah, and finally, some helpful community resources that I have had the advantage of in my years. Of course, the first one is your dev flutter.dev. They have a lot of documentation with learning, catered towards learning. They have individual topics as well, like how you are gonna initiate a network request, how you get values, how you're gonna pass your JSONs. So they have always have examples for that. So it's quite easy to work with. And Risocoder and Code with Andrea, these are also free resources that you find. I think the Risocoder one is like a YouTube uh, video tutorials that you can follow, and the last one is more like a blog kind of a thing. So these are all free resources that you can easily work with. They have the latest topics, so uh, you have an easy way of doing things. And yes, that brings me to my basic Flutter workshop completion. So any questions? I will come.
Thank you for the amazing, insightful knowledge you shared with us, sir. Your expertise, passion, and dedication to your craft were evident throughout the session. So, guys, I encourage each of you to take this opportunity to engage further with our esteemed speaker. Please don't hesitate to shoot your questions and share your thoughts. Feel free to unmute your mic, or you may even use the chat box. So, yeah, we have a question.
Mhm.
Any tips for optimizing Flutter app performance, especially for smooth animations?
Yes. So, like I said, animation, like we call it the jank in Flutter language. So those happen because your refresh, your widget tree is being rebuilt too many times. So um, the first act that you should do is obviously check your developer tools, see which frame it janks on. And when you tap on a jank frame, like you have the option to view which widget it actually gives the bad response. And from backtracking, you can see like whether there's any way of reducing that. So one way, so Flutter framework already has a lot of improvements on to solve the jank. But one way of doing things would be wrapping it in a render environment. So render box, I think it was called render. Yeah, I think it was called render box. So you can, it's like a cover that you can put on. So it won't rebuild itself unless it passes on a condition that you can specifically set. So it's kind of overriding the Flutter framework. So you shouldn't do it if at all possible. But yeah, that's always an option. And the next tip would be to see whether there's any way you can stop the redrawing if it's unnecessary. Uh, yeah, I hope that covers up the question.
Guys, you can submit your questions through the link, or you can use chat box. You can even use the WhatsApp group. Yeah, so another question. Tips on ensuring Flutter app UI is responsive on various devices and screen sizes.
Oh, yes, that's a really good question, I'd say. So, like you have seen on Android and iOS, you don't usually get to resize the application and see how it works. But if you are developing on, let's say, for tab view and uh, the mobile view, uh, it doesn't usually your application is ported just like that. But in some cases, you need to add things like layout builder, and that's a builder that will fire on screen sizes. So if you resize, it's usually very much used on Mac OS or web applications because you can always resize the window as you want, and that will trigger an event each time the resize happens. So you can uh, have an if condition. It's mostly you have always if condition. So on a specific a band of width, you show this sort of a widget. on anything else, you show another widget. So that's probably one way of doing things. And number two would be trying to use flexible widgets. So things like wrap. Wrap. So I told that the bread and butter of any widget is row and columns, and wrap is just the combination of two in a sense. So if you have, let's say, wrap, uh, you have a row kind of a solution. But if you don't have the screen width to support enough components within the separate row, it will just go on to the second column of the row. So that's like a widget that you can use with flexible. It's like a flexible thing. So try to always use flexible widgets with wrap and expanders and flexible widget, the name flexible, and try to move a lot with layout builders. That's yeah, that's my advice for you.
Thank you, sir. So we have some questions from the form. How much of a demand is there for Flutter programming in today's job markets?
I'd say there's a good demand in Sri Lanka. Um, so mobile development in general, they have somewhat lesser demand than backend compared to backend development or um, maybe even web development, but things are picking up again. It used to be there was a lot of job opportunities available for in Sri Lanka. I've seen there's a good trend of getting more Flutter development jobs. I think even in our workplace, there was a couple of vacancies some time back. So there is a good traction of it, but in comparison to other countries, I'd say Sri Lanka is still behind because Flutter is highly, I mean, highly like searched for in other job areas in other countries. So I guess it's just a matter of picking up the pace that we were on. Uh, Hopefully, we get more opportunities in Sri Lanka rather than outside. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. We got one more question.
Mhm.
Which IDE is better to get used to? VS Code or Android Studio?
Ooh. So personally, I am always sticking with Android Studio, but the problem is it will always depend on what sort of a machine you have, like a laptop you have on your self, like because Android Studio it's very memory consumed and it slows down performance a lot, particularly if you run it with a Chrome. That's gonna crash and burn your laptop. So Android Studio, like people usually go for VS Code instead, um, because it's very lightweight and you can just you can, I think you can even use it on a 4 GB RAM or something. So you can develop your applications with just that. But if you go with an Android Studio, uh, you have uh, you have a lot of things inbuilt, like the performance tooling you have as Windows on the Android Studio itself. So if you have access to a good laptop, I'd say try to go for Android Studio because it has the better developer experience in a sense. But if you have performance constraints, just go for VS Code. So at the end of the day, you can just open up developer tools in a different window with a different command. It's just not on your IDE itself, but that's just a preference.
Okay, thank you. So we've got questions coming up. Two more, sir.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
any trending design systems other than Material Tree that might help me get some more points in this hackathon and create a nice product too?
Hmm. So Material 3 is the newest version of Material. But like I said, if you don't want to go for the whole Material or Cupertino, if you don't want to constrain to that notion, um, the best thing is to try checking Dribble and other UI or Figma. So they have free designs that is available there. So note of advice though, like not all designs are possible to do as a developer. I mean, maybe you can, but you have to spend a lot of time and effort to just do those sort of designs, and that is not practical and feasible enough uh, in a hackathon, I'd say. Like, you have to manage your time a lot. So try to do some digging with some good UI sites and get some inspiration there. Because if you want to be ahead of the curve and show yourself outside of just material or Cupertino, you need to see it in a very good design perspective uh, that is not on a framework level. I'm sorry, but you need to do some digging there.
Okay, thank you. And the last question. Any tips to build custom UIs rather than using default material UI?
Yes, so like I said, the bread and butter is your row and columns and the container. So you have a lot of customization options. So for an example, like the list style, that there's a widget called list style, and that was what I was using on the UI that I showed on the demo. So that is the inbuilt way of doing things. You have a title, you have a like a box you can it's predefined. You have a title, you have a leading icon, you have a trailing icon, you have a body, you have a subtitle. That's it. There's no other customization options available, and that's material and Cupertino both. So what you can do instead is just use it as a row and column combination with containers and like different stylings for each different components. Uh, yeah. So I mean, in terms of design, sky is the limit, I'd say. Like, you can do anything you want. Like, you can, there are, there's a widget called Custom Painter. You can draw curves and, like, wave kind of formations. You can have different gradients. So it's your total yours to do with. But uh, I guess it will all depend on what sort of a design language that you're going for. You might have heard this with in a design workshop, because you need to always follow a design language when you're building an app, and it needs to be consistent within the application, not just the list style. So you can't just have a really nice looking list style and just a plain looking app bar or something. So it needs to be consistent, and that's the hard part. So you can't just design for one concept. You need to be consistent and do that change for everything, and that takes time. So you need to have some sort of a good designing mindset to tone it down and figure it out, what's the best you can do for the fixed time limit you have. That's the advice I can give. And also try the third-party libraries. There are a lot of things people have already done. So like I said, you don't need to always reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of things that you can just get it as a package itself and just try it out. Always go to pub.dart and see whether there's anything that has been done already by someone else, and try things out.
Okay, thank you. We got one more question. I personally feel like this is a common question everybody is going to have. So, when
Mhm.
working with Flutter, how can we effectively handle errors and exceptions in our code?
Good question. Really good question. So, uh, like I said, the heart of the application is your state management. And with whatever state management that you use, it will differ. The answer to that will differ. So, uh, and the also the app architecture. Always use a error handler, like a generic error handler, and that always tends to be some sort of kind of a small box going from the bottom and saying, okay, you have something issue and goes down. So that's the snack bar in Flutter perspective, and it you can design it again as you want. So I always have that as the common component, and you have an error service where you can just error type, and I showed you. So if I was to use Riverpod, um, I showed you that there was different callbacks that I get on error, do something else. So if I was to using a Riverpod, I would have used that. Or if I was doing like API level manipulations, so you have what you generally do is you have a single API client with I don't know, like error handling. If it's more than 200, it's not within 200, 300 range, it's an error. So you throw some sort of an error depending on that with the same client that is going to be reused by all requests. So within that singular place, you can just get that error and just throw it to the error handler. So what I usually do is the error. I have lightning, sorry. Yeah. So what I usually do is I have an error handler with a different provider that is going to be listening on the top level, so that same error handler can be reused by any other controller. And that's what I usually do. So I just push the exception to that particular error handler. And since that's a top level handler, it will always show some sort of a snack bar or something like that. So that's the most common thing that you can do. I hope I was clear enough. I'm sorry, it's a bit lightning and thundering over here. So yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the valuable and insightful
Is there
answers, and
any
thank you, guys.
is there any other questions? Can
Uh, guys, got any more questions? I think that's it. So thank you so much, sir, for the questions, for the answers.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. IEEE student branch of UCSC, and
Yes,
it's
sir.
always a really good time to share my knowledge along with all of you.
Okay. Can you wait a moment, sir?
Yeah, of
I would
course.
like to take this moment to present our valued speaker, a token of our appreciation. Indeed, it's an honor to have shared the presence with you, sir. You're very much obliged. Kindly accept this virtual token as a small gesture of our immense respect and gratitude. Once again, thank you very much for being with us here today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshit. It was a good time. I hope everyone learns something from it. And I'm always open to questions from LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there. So if there's anything that you need to clarify or just ping me on LinkedIn. Yep. All the best for your hackathons.
Thank you, sir. So, guys, as we approach the conclusion of our enlightening program, I extend a warm invitation to each of you to take a snapshot. The virtual background has already been